Okay,
Big
we'll
pole with
go
a
ahead
mailbox
and get
on top, and a
started.
guy would climb up and shove a chicken in there.
Okay, so I'll
Of all
call
the
the
things that we
meeting
don't
to
do,
order, and the first item on the agenda is to review and approve this agenda.
Any changes to the agenda?
Nope.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed the same, motion carried. The next item is the COVID items for discussion and action.
On Friday, as you all know, we got, I think it's Friday, maybe it was Thursday.
Friday.
They all run together.
Yeah.
But we got new guidance from the state that we had to have at least 50% of our instruction in person, which was not included in our original plan. So we had a webinar with DE yesterday, and they gave us some options on what that may look like. There was a lot of things kicked around, and a lot of things kind of still left up in the air. Sometimes, those meetings lead to more questions than they do answers. But I did ask a couple of questions and got responses to them that I think allow us to make the recommendation that we've got ready for tonight. So that's about all there is right now. We're supposed to get some more guidance next week from the Athletic Association and the Athletic Union on what fall sports are gonna look like. Not sure what that is. I've heard a couple of rumors, and don't know if any of them are any good, but, and then, the first week of August, we're supposed to get some further guidance from the State Department of Health on what it looks like if somebody tests positive within the buildings. So,
That's the 1st August.
yep. That's all I have on the updates. Public health, when we met this morning, we talked to Jennifer and got some information from her, what her recommendation was, and we included that information as we put the plan together.
So then the return to learn plan?
Our recommendation goes with what we had originally brought to the board. We would modify that hybrid model to make Wednesdays a non-instructional day. The calendar would need to be adjusted utilizing our extra hours or our PD days, where we would swap out student contact days for professional development days that we have later in the year. We also have about 8 extra days built into the calendar. So we would utilize those extra hours. We will not need to make up snow days, as we're now allowed to do online learning on those days, and it can count. So with students attending, what's that?
We had extra hours built in for that too, for snow days, right?
Yes, yep, about 8 days.
8 days.
So, yep, I think we had 60-some hours. With students attending 2 of 4 instructional days per week, that would meet the governor's 50% threshold for in-person instruction. We are required to allow parents to select online instruction versus face-to-face instruction. For junior high school by quarter, and at elementary by the trimester, as those are our grading periods. With conversation with Butler County Public Health, we would ask that face coverings be strongly recommended but not required when social distancing is not possible. One thing that we discussed in order to make things easier for our secretaries and our office staff and reduce contact would be to waive the online payment fees for 2021. In the past, we said that we would pass those on to the patrons, and so the recommendation would be to not have those at this point. Decisions regarding fall sports and camps are tabled at this point until further guidance from the Athletic Association is provided. And we're getting questions from our fall sports coaches about doing camps and things, and right now, until we get further guidance from the Athletic Association, we don't think that we can move forward with that. We would reconvene our outside speed and agilities beginning on July 24th, which is Monday. That's 2 weeks since the confirmed case that we had, so everybody would have been quarantined for the 2 weeks. open gym would still remain closed at this time. Rationale behind it, CDC, the current recommendations are that the virus that causes COVID-19 is thought to be mostly spread by respiratory droplets released when people talk, cough, or sneeze. It's thought that the virus may also spread to hands from a contaminated surface and then to the nose, mouth, or eyes. Therefore, personal prevention practices that include social distancing and wearing masks are important ways to prevent the virus's spread. Teachers will be required to provide online instruction full-time for students with chronic health conditions. We're also allowed to let parents opt for online instruction at the district's discretion, and we'll need additional time for the teachers to provide the online instruction, and Wednesdays would be utilized for that and the professional development that we're required to have for our teachers in case we have to go to all online instruction at some point. Plus, with the adoption of the Canvas, all our teachers are learning a new platform, and that's gonna take some time. We gotta be careful how much we ask our teachers to do if we're not going to provide them time to do it and time to learn it. Let's see. Face masks are not recommended by the Iowa Department of Education at this time. Following was stated in the FAQ released on 6/30, while cloth face coverings can reduce the spread of COVID-19 when worn properly, and when other social distancing measures are difficult to maintain, the Department of Education, in collaboration with the Iowa Department of Public Health, does not recommend that districts and non-public schools require face coverings for all students and staff because of the considerable health and safety, legal, and training implications for such policy. Some individuals might not be able to use cloth face coverings due to a health or safety concern, including but not limited to age, developmental disability, underlying condition, or mental health concern. Numerous considerations need to be examined at the local level based on individual staff and student needs. Reduced staff and substitute availability is expected. The federal government has provided some assistance for those with health needs. So those are the things that we looked at as we sat down and made this recommendation. So it's just an adaptation of the recommendation that we put together with our team originally, when we've spent numerous hours meeting over several months putting that together.
I'm sorry I couldn't be there this morning, but I do have a question on the face mask where it said, because they're not recommending face covering because of considerable health and safety, legal and training implications of such a policy. Could you just talk about that a little bit more?
The Department of Education has recommended that we do not require them because of the liability implications that it has for the school district.
Okay.
I've read that there's been several times in other countries where kids have been required to wear face masks in physical education, and they've died from that.
Thoughts?
I'm just surprised
I have a
about that.
question.
Comments?
Can I have a question? I'm new to this. Is this
That's
the-
up to Lori.
Do we allow opinions? Can we ask questions?
Listen, I'll give you a couple minutes.
Okay.
But we'll keep it to a couple of minutes so that it doesn't get too long, but yeah, if you want a little comment.
So the recommendation that you just presented and all the content,
Mhm.
when was that, whose recommendation is that? Is that the board's? This is my first board meeting with you guys.
It's the administration team, along with some of the staff, put it together after considering,
So the group that met before for the return to learn plan met again to determine this model.
yes, after the governor's announcement, yes.
Okay.
And there was several on staff for the return to learn
Mhm.
teachers. I don't know how many numbers there were.
There was
but
quite a few people,
there
I
was.
think, on
Yeah,
that
there
list,
was.
like
There were.
40-some members.
They met
Were-
quite a bit, so
Were
this
there,
summer.
community members, or parents on that?
The staff members that are parents.
Okay.
Yeah, and we did put out a survey earlier, with some different questions, but no, there weren't, it was made up of staff and administration.
The survey I received as a parent stated, you rate your fears, 1 to what have you.
That is, yes, that is.
Yep, that's the one.
Yep.
I don't recall it actually being the same survey or similar to the survey that Clarksville received, where it
Yep.
stated,
It was different.
yep. Is there a reason we decided to not go with that model that Clarksville received, that asked the parents what their recommendation on return to learn options were?
The needs of the Clarksville district are different than the needs of the North Butler district. Clarksville staff is not taking on a whole new learning platform for the online learning, whereas our staff is. And we are
It's an option?
we are twice as large.
Yeah, and I think at the time when we came up with the survey, it was our best effort to put a survey out there. You can always, after the fact, say, oh, it could have been somewhat different, but it was our best effort to
Can we do
ask
that again?
people.
Can we make this fluid situation fluid and survey the parents again? Because like, you guys were all given new information, we're all given new information as parents, community members. I feel like it's continually evolving, so I'm just wondering if that's something that would be considered by this committee.
You know, we can consider doing another survey, but the reality is we're sitting here on July 21st. We've got school starting in another month. We need to make decisions based on the best information that we have. And so that's what we're really going to do at this time.
Okay, I have
Yep.
one last question, and I can go to
Okay.
question.
Okay?
The reality is that I would say there's probably a 95% chance that what we decide tonight is gonna get changed by somebody at a higher level before we get to August 24th anyway.
Probably, yeah, it may, it may.
Yeah.
So my final question about this topic is, why not, based off of the information that was provided to the group, what factors were contributed to say no, not full-time? What
But the
said
two biggest factors are that, number one, we need time to be able to sanitize and clean, and number two is by law, we now have to provide professional development to our teachers. Otherwise, when we go to online learning, it doesn't count.
The cleaning should happen not just on the off day.
Well, it's going to.
It has to happen every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
It was set up.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying you shouldn't designate a cleaning day when everything should get cleaned every single day.
Well, it's gonna be a deeper cleaning day,
Okay.
so we can get to
Mhm.
more of the stuff that is
There
not
are
necessarily going to be.
multiple reasons why we have Wednesday as a professional development day. And one of those reasons includes that we are taking more time to be thorough in our cleaning.
That should happen every day.
It should happen every day.
If you told a hospital that, hey, you guys can deep clean on Wednesdays, we're gonna do something extra on Wednesday, so every other day you get what we get, it should happen every day. I think the cleaning statement is not irrelevant. The professional development, I understand, but the cleaning statement does not apply to a day. The
Well,
2 to
but
4
you have to
range-
understand, Heather,
Yeah,
that most people are cleaning a 2,000 square foot house, and I have 2 custodians that come in at night for 6 or 7 hours, and they're cleaning a 100,000 square foot building.
more people will have to clean. That's what will have to happen.
Well, we understand that, but you also have to understand, we have to be able to meet the needs of our staff.
I
too.
think what we're saying is that the sanitary cleaning is going to happen every day.
Yep.
It's the things like vacuuming and the things like making sure that the gym floor is ready for gym class and it's like sparkling shiny. Those are the things that are gonna be happening on Wednesdays when our staff is in
Okay.
professional development.
I'll give you
The
one.
sanitary
Okay.
cleaning where we're cleaning tables and
Okay.
desks, that is happening on the daily.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've spent probably close to $15,000 on new sanitizing equipment,
Excellent.
so.
Can I ask a
There
question
we-
based on the new information? So the governor said that we had to have 50% in person, correct? And previously, our plan was going to be in person 2 days a week and online 3 days a week. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So now with her guidance of 50% online, the answer is to essentially lessen the education that our children are getting by taking away Wednesdays and making that a completely professional development day? That's how we're getting away with the 50% in person?
Yeah, and we're not gonna be the only ones that do that.
Yeah, and the
So
thing
what
I would
days will they go
say,
to school?
the thing that, let me just add, the thing that I would say is, you need to realize that this is something that's going to be fluid, that we're gonna be constantly reviewing. this is how we feel is in the best interest of our district to get started with the school district.
And that's,
This is
it's the
some-
recommendation, the board has not
Right.
made an active decision on the new recommendation yet.
And so this is how we get started.
Okay.
I mean, there are many factors. I'll give you one additional factor. Kids have not been in school since March. Each one of these kids is in a different place in terms of their education. And some of them were able, some of them were probably advanced and they didn't miss that much by not going to school for that quarter, or just doing some things online. Others maybe didn't do anything at home. And so by having half the kids in this classroom on any given day, the teachers will have more one-on-one with those students and be able to evaluate each student to see where is that student at, and now what do we do to get them up to speed so that they can continue their learning. So that's just one factor. There are many factors that were considered, but in addition to safety, that was another one.
May I add something, Lori?
Yeah.
The truth is that when we return to school, the majority of the time is not going to be dedicated to teaching new things. We are going to be assessing our students to figure out where they are at and where we should begin with them when it comes time to teach. The first 4 to 6 weeks probably will be completely getting to know the students and where they're at in their learning environment right now, and helping them cope with returning to school and that emotional aspect of it, the social aspect of it, and renewing that new social integration that they have been lacking since March, and also with that, like Lori was saying, that assessment period of understanding where they are in their academic learning and where our teachers need to pick up. Because right now, our teachers do not have any idea where these students are in meeting their standards and
And
where
they-
they need to go.
Yeah, they should.
Is part of the assessment that you're gonna be doing with the children going to be considered for going back to school more in a better regular schedule? Or are they going to consider how a child is on Monday and how they are on Thursday when they come back, if they have to spend half of their day going back over what they did on Monday?
Is it 2 days or is it 2 to 4 days? How many days is this recommendation?
2 days.
Two would be a Monday, Thursday,
Yeah,
and a Tuesday, Friday.
So we're
And
really
if we,
not,
like, if we had a holiday on Monday,
Meeting
then it would be
50%.
Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Friday.
You're meeting 50% because they took Wednesdays away. Now there will be no online education.
There will be
To clarify-
online education
Oh,
on
yeah.
the days that they are not in class. They will have things to
Okay.
do
so it's 2
online.
days.
They are doing 2 days.
Not
a
not necessarily online for like elementary kids, that, it might be more packet type work.
week. Right.
Okay,
Things that will be sent home. They will
Yeah.
have continued learning at home to do when they are not in class.
I have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
If, when you do the online with the kids, like, me and my husband work full-time, we're both 40 hours a week.
Yep.
How are the parents that are full-time supposed to be expected to not only come home and like be a teacher on top of, and after they've played all day, then make them learn too? It makes it,
Those are
It's a
things that
very-
we're working on because we want to make it as easy for parents as we can, because the teaching and that, we understand that y'all are working full-time also.
yeah. But I
So
mean, it's just-
there's still a lot of discussion, and some of that discussion can't happen
Mhm.
until we have a decision from the board.
Explore.
So,
And like I said, this is fluid. We're gonna be getting more information. We have taken this approach of getting out there early and making some decisions because we want people to be able to plan. I mean, I think that's extremely important. We all want our kids back in school, we all want that. And so as quickly as we can get to that point, that's where we wanna be. It's just, this is how do we feel we can best get started to be safe, to really know our kids, figure out where they're at, and then evaluate what's the environment. Where are we at in the state with COVID? And do we feel comfortable opening up full-time? And as soon as we can, we're gonna do that. So,
I wanna go
sorry, I
back
have
to,
one more, go ahead.
go back to Sarah's question, if I understood right this morning, for the PD days on Wednesdays, so it was gonna be half day, and then the other one was gonna be some online stuff too, with that Wednesdays, did I understand that right, or?
You're directing that to
For the
Yeah,
teachers,
I-
you mean?
Yeah, or for the Wednesdays, what we're looking at now.
There would be no online learning. It would be, part of the day probably be professional development, and part of the day would be time for the teachers to develop their, especially the fourth grade and up level, because they're gonna be working with the Canvas to start building that platform. Because
Just-
we don't have anybody in the district that has experience with building it. We have some that have experience using it from the learner side.
Just to clarify, and I wanna say my point, I want my kids back into, I do. I wish we could start day one, but my biggest, with this plan that they've got now, you know, I want them back, but I think it gives everybody ready to get ready for a Canvas, get ready for the online. We're gonna look at it again, it's every month in October. What I am afraid of is if we send them all back and we're not ready for all the online stuff, as soon as there's one case, school could be shut down for 2 weeks. You know, it's just, at least gives them a little bit, that's my feelings on it. We're trying to get it set up for the best ability, instead of throwing them, all go back in.
Okay, so one more
And
question.
I
Excuse me.
want them back, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
I will take one more question.
We can take more questions than one, can't we, if I have one?
I just wanna say, I just wanna do a plea.
Yeah.
To, please consider to send out further surveys, even as school gets started, to ask parents how it's going at home, any suggestions of maybe, could you possibly bring your children to school instead of putting them on the
Well,
bus?
and
If we
that's
wanna
what,
try
that will
to,
be sent out.
if we wanna try to
We would
spread out
much
things like
prefer
that.
right now that if parents could bring their kids to school, that they do that.
you know, just questions like that, trying to think of ways that we can
Solutions.
continue.
And that will be
Yes,
part of
the
the
children.
registration process
Yeah,
actually
okay.
too, so.
Okay, very good. Go
Well,
ahead,
I
Heather.
do, sorry. When it comes to the group that just has this recommendation, and looking at COVID cases, what is the, I'm just gonna say this, what is the justification, what's the documentation behind stating that children are at risk, that we can't go full-time? I'm hearing that we can't go full-time because we're not prepared in case we have to go out of school, or we're not prepared for the online learning things.
Mhm.
Is there some fear of our children that they're gonna get COVID? I mean, the fatality right now is 171 children from the ages of 5 to 24 have actually died in the United States. We lose 615 kids to child abuse death in a year. We lose way more than that to suicide and mental health, and these children are isolated. That is a factor that should be a very strong consideration. They are isolated. A lot of their parents aren't going to quit their jobs. They're not going to because they can't pay their bills. They'll be left alone.
I think the worry more so is that if a student were to get COVID and spread it, it would spread then to the family members of those students. And that is the biggest concern. I know that the numbers are there showing that children are at a very low risk.
Yes.
And I don't think that it's the children that we're looking to protect as much as we're looking to protect our at-risk staff. We have a lot of staff members who are up there in the years and who maybe have family members who have diseases. We have a lot of parents and grandparents who are caretakers for these children, and we want to make sure that we are protecting those people as well.
And the reality is that all of our health concerns have been discussed and come through the Department of Health.
Yes, and the governor's saying full-time, and I just wanted to know
Though
why.
the governor said at least
recommending
50% of
At
the
least
time.
50%, and if less, tell me why. I mean, AP said full-time. I'm just kind of throwing it out there, like, what are we, besides preparing?
We're not AP, we're a different school
Well,
district.
I think we've talked
It's
about
weeks anyways.
why. I mean, and we feel like our administration team and staff have really vetted this out. And we're in a situation where there are always gonna be some people who are unhappy with the decision. And so we have to make the decision based on the knowledge that we have and what we feel is best for our students and staff at North Butler. and for parents in the community. It's not easy, but that's kind of where we sit right now.
And honestly, if it was my decision to make, I'd be in favor of bringing everybody back, but it's not. I have to take into consideration the needs of my staff, not just the teachers, but my kitchen staff, my paras, my bus drivers, my custodians. And right now, we're just at a place where this recommendation is the only one that makes sense for all of us.
Can I ask one more question? It's not about why, but will you still be doing music, art, gym on these 2 days when that's something that I could probably do at home with my children?
Those are really good questions about what those will look like. They will have specials, but what they're gonna look like at this point, I don't know.
So those are things still.
Because those are required by the state.
Right, right.
But yeah, that's a really good question, and we haven't even begun to address that.
Okay.
I've got a question for Jennifer. Do we, I don't even want to be on the spot, but,
You don't know that.
I know for the sports teams this summer, we've been temp checking the kids. Do we need to be doing that as we get started through the school year here?
I would recommend yes.
Okay.
I know the state has different ideas about that, but I'm kind of the opinion that we do need to be doing that.
Well, I think a good example of that is what we had happen with our open gym.
Yeah,
So, and I know that the last time we met, the board's desire was to have those kids checked before they get on the bus. So I am planning on putting a para on every bus so that the
So
bus
kids
driver
check
don't have to do
everybody
it, so the para can
okay.
check them when they get on the bus.
And then check them, everybody as they're coming into the building?
The ones that are dropped off at school, check as they come into the building. We won't recheck the ones that come in off the bus.
Okay.
Yeah, they can check it
Yeah. I have looked at some stations that will screen as they come in, so we don't have to have somebody on the spot to take everybody's temperature. There's some stations that are ultraviolet or infrared or whatever the heck it is that will take that for you. And actually, I saw one today that will do multiple kids at a time, and do up to like 100 people at a time.
Okay.
Don't know how much it costs, but that would be very helpful.
We have somebody test positive, or, you know, we've got a temp, they could go to get tested, come up positive. What do we need to be doing as a district at that point then for the kids that are still in school?
if the student, so we look at two different things. We look first off, how far, where did the kid get into school, or the staff member, because it could just as
Right.
easily be a staff person. So we look at, first of all, how far did they get into the school? Did they get to the door and they didn't get any further? That's one thing. But if they become ill in school, or they spend the whole day at school and they go home and become ill through the night or early the next morning, then we have to look as it stands right now. And I have talked to Mr. Foster this morning along with Mrs. Holm and,
Ms. Simmons.
and Mrs. Engelman, thank you. And right now, the way the guidance stands and the way we ran baseball and softball season is if a kid or a staff person tests positive and they have been in the school in the 48 hours prior to either becoming sick or testing positive if they're an asymptomatic person, then all of the people that were in that classroom, teacher, para, students, would all be then considered exposures. And they would all have to self-isolate for 14 days, which is what happened with the open gym thing, a couple of weeks ago.
But there's also, the biggest problem with that also with the summer baseball is we're doing it one way in Butler County, and Hancock County's doing it totally different. They're telling their schools another thing, and Polk County's telling their schools a completely different thing. So that's now all been, by the governor, now put back on the state, and we don't have guidance on that till the first week of August.
Right. I guess where I'm going with that is, we need to be prepared for the fact that we're gonna have somebody come up positive, we're gonna be shut down for 2 weeks, we're gonna have to do the online learning. So we need to get the teachers trained, you know, we've gotta have the time to get that done.
But is the guidance to shut down that class, not the entire school?
It's anybody that was within 6 feet in more than 15 minutes is what the guidance says. And so in an elementary setting, it would be everybody in that classroom. But then you look at the junior high school students, and where I get concerned about is those students move from classroom to classroom to classroom. And so the one student could very easily have 50 or 60 contacts that were in different classrooms throughout the day.
and 50 or
And you
60
may
is a
not
quarter of
know
our high
this-
school population,
Would,
it shuts
you may
us
not
down.
know this yet, but would you be shutting down the elementary school if it was a high school student that didn't have any elementary
Contacts.
relatives or
Probably not, but that's, again.
case
you know,
by case?
Yeah, but-
certainly.
and we have to wait for the guidance that comes from the state, and that's going to tell us whether it's a building shutdown or a district shutdown.
Is
And-
that positive with symptoms or positive without symptoms?
Positive period.
Positive, period, okay.
And the truth of the matter is that the guidance that we are receiving changes on the daily.
Yes.
We are getting new information every single day, so the decision that we make tonight is probably going to be changed within the next week. You know, there is really no solid, this is what we are going to do. The plans that we are making are the plans for the moment.
And the reality is we can't go forward with planning anymore until we have a decision. That's why we're meeting again tonight after having a regular meeting last week.
Right, so we're just trying to stay on top of that, but appreciate all the questions and all the interests, like I
Thank you
said.
for letting us
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah,
And
there's-
I'm more than happy to answer any questions if you call or email.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming, Jennifer.
yeah, and we'll try to
Anything
stay
else?
on top of it
Ed?
and see what additional guidance we get, but, you know, our goal is to get the kids their education and get them back in school as soon as we possibly can.
And we very much appreciate your attendance here tonight because it is our desire to communicate clearly what we are doing here, you know, what our intentions are and how we're trying to keep your kids safe and how we're trying to keep our staff members safe and really why we're here, you know.
Thanks. Okay. All right, so, do we need a motion then? Are we comfortable to make a motion to approve the return to learn plan as it's been updated?
Do we know how that's gonna work for lower, like, preschool, kindergarten, first- I mean,
right
like,
now-
lower ages, how?
Some of the PPE that we're looking at for the lower ages would be not a mask, but a shield that also has cloth around the bottom of it. The cost of them is about $40 a pop. But at the lower levels, it's important, we think, that the teachers and kids are able to see each other's face so that they can understand what's being said. So that's kind of what we're looking at for the lower end. Preschool will be on basically a 3-day rotation. So preschool would be here on Wednesday still, but just one group. So it'd be like a Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, Wednesday following Monday type schedule. So at least as of now, right, Laura? That's
Right.
my understanding. So,
Right.
because we have to still be able to meet those hours for the grant.
How will families be able to?
We're gonna have to come up with some sort of calendar and that'll be, Mrs. Landers will have to get that out. So those are all things that we gotta get in place
Yeah,
yet.
we still got a lot to work on yet. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll probably take a vacation in October,
So could I get a motion or
or the third week of
Does
November when this all
someone
goes
make a
away.
motion to approve the updated return to learn plan?
I'll make a motion.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor signify with aye.
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 Opposed, the same. Motion carried.
Okay, I will give an explanation out to our staff and community tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, now we're gonna move to closed session.
I will make a motion to enter closed session via item 21.5I to evaluate the professional competency of an individual whose appointment, hiring, performance, or discharge is being considered when necessary to prevent needless and irreparable injury to that individual's reputation, and that individual requests a closed session.
Did I get a second?
Second.
Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
thanks all for
Thank you.
coming. Thanks,
Is that
Jennifer.
right, Shelley?